ready to begin. Please welcome back to the General of British Chairman.
Get you perked up post lunch. Welcome back. I hope you had a very successful morning and lunch so far. Met some great people, made some good connections. We've got another fantastic lineup for you this afternoon. We don't have a formal break in the afternoon because there's so many great things to pack in. So if you want to grab a coffee, just please do as you come and go. So, to kick it off, I am delighted that the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, is addressing us with a keynote speech. Given the current geopolitical climate, I think he would agree it's a huge honour that he has made the time to meet us today. His inbox is no doubt bursting, but it's important to hear him talk about business and diplomacy coming together to build brand Britain. I know we're all really looking forward to hearing from him. So, without further ado, please welcome to the stage, Foreign Secretary.
Thank you, Siobhan, for this opportunity. You can't be a Member of Parliament for 25 years and not have come across the British Chambers of Commerce working hard for businesses all over Britain. And on becoming Foreign Secretary, I quickly found out your global network of chambers, which I relied on and worked with, working hard, of course, for businesses all over the world. And it's wonderful to have the opportunity to speak to you all today. And even more importantly, to get us working much more closely together in the years ahead. Now, starting this job, I said that the SCU would be the international delivery arm of the government's mission. The first of which is kickstarting economic growth. This department must play its important role and its full part in rebuilding Britain's economic foundations and putting more money into people's pockets in every part of the country. And that's part of this government's plan for change. Growth requires a new partnership between government and business, from SMEs to multinationals, from tech to pharma, from manufacturing to services. You are the lifeblood of our economy. You are the difference between stagnation and growth, and you are the energy on which the economy depends. And of course, our success as a country is built on that. For too long, I watched in dismay as first 14 years of the last government loosened those bonds, culminating in one of my predecessors' 4-letter rebuke to business. My promise to you today, with this Prime Minister and this Cabinet, is that we banished a culture of frivolity, replaced it with one of seriousness and purpose, because, let me emphasise, stability has to be in this government's DNA, partnership has to be in this government's DNA, reform has got to be in this government's DNA, and trade and openness are fundamental for this government's DNA and the success of this country. So we mean business. There's no going back to the post-1989 order. The liberal assumptions of my youth have collapsed. We live in a time of accelerating threats in which not just our defence spending, but our whole socio-economic model needs reshaping around this government's plan for change. We've been here before. In 1952, Beveridge wrote his famous report into the 5 great evils stalking British society: want, disease, ignorance, squalor, and idleness. The report proved so popular that the government translated it into French and German and dropped copies of it over Nazi-occupied Europe at the time. It was the welfare state that followed in the UK. The new multilateral bodies like the United Nations, NATO, and GATT were built on the back of that reindustrialised and innovative period after the Second World War, as governments and businesses united in a national mission. Friends, today we need to rediscover that partnership once more. This is another great reforming Labour government delivering on our mandate for change, seeking to rekindle the zeal that lit up the governments of Attlee and Blair. And you see that in West Streeting, abolishing the bureaucracy of NHS England, in Liz Kendall's complete overhaul of the welfare system, in Rachel Reeves' changes to pension funds and regulation, in Ed Miliband dragging our energy infrastructure into the 21st century, and in Johnny Reynolds' forthcoming industrial strategy, which will double down on the sectors in which our comparative advantage is greatest, and in Angela Ranger's major planning reforms and her devolution revolution, including, of course, new local growth plans that bring about that accelerated regional productivity. And of course, in Keir Starmer's announcement of a radical increase in defence spending. My argument to you today is that this nexus of issues, social security, national security, economic renewal, have become ever more intertwined, and we must now respond. There are 3 great geoeconomic challenges of our time which we have to confront. The first is that those multilateral rules and institutions built to manage the global economy are clearly under deep stress and threat. I'm a multilateralist, but I'm also a realist. There is no new WTO negotiating round in sight. No fully functioning system for managing trade disputes. Nowhere near enough speed to deliver climate finance to those most in need. Of course, we will continue to support the WTO rules, which are so essential to our exporters, but we will also form new coalitions of the willing to build momentum behind specific initiatives that play to the British economy's present and future strengths. For example, we're supporting a plurilateral initiative at the WTO on e-commerce, which will vastly increase the potential of digital trade. We're using our accession to the CPTPP to raise standards on transparency and competition across that bloc, and supporting expansion of that agreement with negotiations and trade with Indonesia and Costa Rica having recently applied. And the Department of Business and Trade's trade strategy will set out how we will ensure we have the tools to promote and protect our interests in response to this changing global context. Second, industrial activism is on the rise. In general, the global stock of subsidies has been climbing since 2008. Barriers to trade, tariffs and regulations are going up. US policy across at least the last decade is a reflection of that long-term trend. not a deviation from it. Like it or not, the laissez-faire approach to globalization, which ruled and dominated from 1989 to 2008, is dead and buried. So in response to this new world, I've asked the department to turbocharge the relationships which will generate the greatest return on investment for UK PLC in the medium term. At the top of that list, of course, stands the European Union, China, and the United States of America. And they will remain there for the foreseeable future. That's why we are resetting relations with our closest neighbours in Europe. The first UK-EU summit will be in May. And as we seek to improve the conditions for trade and investment with our closest partners, while we're also pursuing a policy of pragmatic engagement with China, re-establishing the economic cooperation and dialogue on global challenges like climate change, whilst ensuring we will not undermine our own national security, leaving behind the hopeless oscillation which characterised the last government. And while we're working on a new economic prosperity deal with the United States, with a technology partnership at its core, the two countries whose scientists invented the internet must keep on pushing at the frontier of technological ingenuity to unlock opportunities for our citizens. But I challenge the department to look beyond the obvious and to prioritise those partnerships which will underpin our work and underpin Johnny Reynolds' forthcoming industrial strategy. I've just returned from a visit to Japan with Johnny Reynolds, where we held an economic so-called 2+2 dialogue that had previously only been held between Japan and the United States. It's a great example of a relationship that can soar to new heights through deeper diplomatic investment. Alongside Italy, our GCAP fighter jet program is progressing, generating thousands of high-end jobs across the UK. Jetco's manufacturing plant in Sunderland is expanding. Other Japanese businesses are expanding their investments right across the UK. And Japan's defence budget, now the fourth largest in the world, and their commitment to spend $7 billion on chip and quantum R&D offers untold potential for further collaboration. Thirdly, the future success of our nation depends on our ability to harness epoch-defining changes in emerging technology. In particular, of course, AI, like no technology before it. It will shape not just our economic prospects, but our national security, our welfare state, and the pace of our transition to a clean economy. And we are in a hyper-competitive race between nations and companies to reap the advantages. That means we have to get behind our institutions and businesses with far more energy and dynamism than before. You don't need me to tell you this. Technology is obviously at the frontier of our geopolitical environment. As we move from an era of AI towards artificial general intelligence, we face a period where international norms and rules will have to adapt rapidly. It's absolutely essential that the UK, the US, and our allies, governments and companies work together ever more closely to win that technological race. And that requires us to back our thriving startup scene through our AI action plan, but also our work on a quantum industry, our world-leading economic institutions, and it means doubling down on our resilience, reducing supply chain vulnerabilities and ensuring national security, particularly, and the risks informed the approach to driving growth in key sectors. With the National Security and Investment Act well established and the Procurement Act coming into force last month, the UK has set out a framework for economic security. There will be difficult decisions to be made, but our investment in managing the risks renders us better able to reap the rewards as well, because a strong economy is the best guarantee of security. Now, when I look around this room, I see all the answers that we need to how Britain can be and will succeed in the new era. And let's not be shy. We are the world's largest net exporter of financial services. We are the second largest exporter of professional and business services. And I used to be a lawyer, so I know that Britain remains the country to which the world wants to solve its legal disputes. We're the third largest exporter of creative industries. Our trade is worth almost 2/3 of our GDP, and despite the new mood of economic nationalism, our openness is in fact what remains our strength. And on my travels, admiration for the UK resounds, because this is one of the easiest places in the world to set up a business, because our corporate tax rate is the lowest in the G7, because we have the most attractive intellectual property framework in Europe, because we have 90 world-class universities, 4 in the global top 10, because we could secure announcements of 68 billion of investment at a summit like the one that the Prime Minister chaired just last October, because we are the top provider of green finance products and services worldwide, and because we have a defence sector ready to boom on the back of new investment. I'm sure you will agree that this is a compelling story for us to tell the world, and we need to deepen the links between those in this room and civil servants in Whitehall so that we can better seize that opportunity abroad together. So let me tell you how I'm doing that within the Foreign Office. The review of economic diplomacy, which I commissioned, concluded that to deliver the long-term change needed to raise living standards across the UK, we needed to work not only harder, but smarter. The 21st century diplomat needs a very different set of tools from their forebears. Greater economic and technological expertise at all levels. More links with higher growth sectors. Far deeper understanding of the UK's nations as regions, as well as the subnational economies overseas. There are some good examples of this happening already, including those in close collaboration with the BCC's own global network. But as part of this government's efforts to make the state more efficient and focused, I wanted to deliver a new and systematic approach to driving growth within the FCDO. Because my starting point is that foreign policymakers and businesses need a far higher quality of conversation and exchange of information. So I am today launching a quarterly Lancaster House business engagement series where my top ambassadors and experts will regularly share insights with the UK's top international businesses to hear your experiences and challenges and address them and deal with them. And like trade commissioners, those same ambassadors will deliver domestic roadshows at least once a year, meeting the mayors and regional businesses most relevant to their markets. From the next financial year, all ambassadors in priority markets will be assessed against their delivery of trade and investment wins overseas. From now on, I've told my ambassadors that they should give equal weight to their contacts in business as well as in politics. And from now on, all ambassadors in our most significant markets will work much more closely with regional trade commissioners to deliver on priority opportunities across the industrial strategy growth driving sectors that have been identified, producing strategic economic growth plans, identifying key deliverables in each market and implementing via growth mission boards, driving together across departmental teams at posts. And this in turn will help determine how this ministerial team puts its support behind generating more deals and partnerships, such as Canal Plus, its decision to float on the London Stock Exchange, or our tech security initiative with India. And this delivery abroad needs to be backed by an equivalent strategic hub here in London, which is why today I'm establishing a geopolitical impact unit in King Charles Street, explicitly tasked with sharing our latest geopolitical insights into the thinking with you. A one-stop shop for you to access the best thinking inside of the SCDO, but also charged with integrating your understanding of trends and challenges into our policy. Because I know that in 2025, every successful CEO is a full of foreign secretary, and the team around you know what it means to be diplomats. When I need to understand key countries, I found it's often you in business that know the key players best, that sense the risks first, that see the opportunities clearest, and can provide the most unvarnished advice. Yesterday, sitting in my office with Bernie Mensah, head of Bank of America, I was reminded about that incredible insight. So this new geopolitical unit will be designed to make sure that your insight and our insight are made more the sum of their parts. I'm in no doubt that delivering on all of these changes will require both a serious upskilling and a sustained cultural transformation, which requires far greater fluidity and exchange and interchange between my department and businesses which you represent. So today I've written to the CEOs of some of the UK's largest firms, offering to send diplomats on placements to each of them, building on existing examples of placements at firms like Barclays and Octopus Energy, and offering each of them the opportunity for members of their teams to spend time gaining experience in the SCDO. And I'm pleased to confirm that as part of this new programme, we're planning a second diplomat to the UK's largest aerospace, defence and security firm, BAE Systems. Today I'm also announcing a new diplomatic advisory hub within the British Chambers of Commerce. Working alongside the DBT's Business Growth Service, the hub will explicitly ensure SMEs across the country can access the same geopolitical advice and support that is available to multinationals. And finally, to strengthen the ties between our posts and British businesses overseas, I'm delighted to accept on behalf of my heads of mission and BCC's offer for all ambassadors and high commissioners to be honouring president of their host chambers of commerce to get better connectivity. I hope that you will agree that this amounts to a comprehensive programme, not only for my own department's approach to economic diplomacy, but in the government's commitment to deliver long-term change alongside you and for the benefit of the British people. I don't want to pretend that there are quick fixes. This work will be ongoing, cumulative, and sometimes tough, and that's why we have described our project as a mission, to use this period of profound global transformation as a decade of national renewal. Thank you very much indeed. One from Shahab Khan
Geoeconomic from ITV News. Foreign Secretary, on the issue of Ukraine, are the proposals around a coalition of the willing pointless if Vladimir Putin continues to say that all military aid to Ukraine has to stop if there's to be a ceasefire? And a quick second question, if I may. Foreign Secretary, earlier this week you said that Israel had broken international law by stopping humanitarian aid from reaching Gaza. After Downing Street publicly disagreed, you've now changed your tune. You now say that you weren't being clear and that it's difficult to see how Israel's actions are compatible with international law. There's a slight difference there. Why have you changed your mind? And shouldn't you just tell us what you think?
Well, look, I'm very pleased at the leadership role that we and our French colleagues have been able to play in ensuring that we can support Ukraine at this time. I was very pleased to see the joint statement from President Zelensky and the President of the United States just yesterday. My own belief is that we have to continue to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position to ensure that we get a serious negotiation. Now, I said a few days ago that Putin should simply accept an unconditional ceasefire. That was the plan on the table. Let's get on with it. What are we waiting for? And what we certainly can't do is give Putin a veto over the security architecture that will govern that peace. And of course that means that there must be a role for those of us in Europe and beyond that want to ensure that Ukraine has the ability to defend itself and to ensure that, as we saw in 2014, Putin is not able to come back for more a few years later. So what we want is an enduring peace, and that's what we'll continue to work on amongst that coalition and, of course, with our US partners. I said back in September, in making a very sober judgment on the basis of our export licensing regime, looking at the law, I had to make a judgment. Was there a clear risk that Israel might be in breach of international humanitarian law obligations? And I made a judgment that there was a clear risk that they might be in breach. And for that reason, we did suspend arms sales that could be used in Gaza, and I stand by that decision today. I've said that 10 times in Parliament since, and I repeated that statement again in Parliament today. At this point in time, I am doing everything I can with partners. It's why I spoke to Secretary Rubio just yesterday about this. It's why I met with the EU High Representative Kaja Kallas, raising issues around Israel and Gaza and a return to conflict. And I wish Steve Witkoff, the US envoy, the very, very best over the coming days as he seeks to get us back to that ceasefire. January brought a ray of hope in the hearts of many, both in Gaza and in Israel. We saw those hostages begin to come out. And I say again, a return to fighting sadly puts those remaining hostages at more peril. And you're hearing the hostage families saying that over the course of the last few days. I'm hugely concerned to see a British citizen wounded, a charity worker in Israel overnight, and very concerned to see the tremendous loss of lives, worse than at any other day in this conflict, and the amount of children that have lost their life as a result of the return to military endeavour. So I'm urging all parties to step back and to get back to that ceasefire. Jessica Frank, I think.
Foreign Secretary, thank you. Jessica Frank-Keys from City AM. You've spoken about looking beyond the obvious with regards to diplomacy and trade within emerging markets around the world. Where do you think Britain most needs to focus this work to best secure our economic prosperity in the decades ahead? And can you put a figure on the amount of economic growth the FCDO hopes to create before the next election? And I have to ask, how can the City of London contribute to that? Thank you.
Well, look, thank you very much. I said in my speech that it remains the case that our biggest trading partner is the European Union, and therefore the work that we are putting in alongside our European partners as we head towards that summit in May is hugely important for our future prosperity. Our relationship with the United States, of course, and we are in discussion following that very good meeting between Prime Minister Starmer and President Trump. We are in discussions with them about a new economic agreement to work on a future agreement that builds on technology and the work that we can do together, given the power of technology in both of our economies particularly. And as I said in my speech, it was also important to begin an economic dialogue once more with China, and that's why it was so important. The Chancellor of the Exchequer visited, and that I was able to visit in the autumn, and then receive a visit from the Chinese Foreign Secretary to King's Charles Street just a few weeks ago. We've got to move away from this ping pong that we saw under the last government. There are areas where we must cooperate. There are areas, of course, where we will compete, and there are areas where we will challenge, but we can continue to build on our trading relationship. And the detailed work is going on in the department to look at these new hinge markets that are so important to our future economy. Clearly, India is hugely important. There are countries in the Gulf, but there are emerging economies like Indonesia, where we've got to play a greater role. What I've said is, for the first time, our ambassadors and our missions in these key markets will have KPIs that contribute to our economic growth, and that won't be unknown to many of the businesses represented in the room. I want to ensure that the SCDO is absolutely the engine of delivering growth as a central mission on behalf of this government. And the city can play a huge role in supporting us and taking part, I hope, in the initiatives I've announced. I do want our diplomats spending more time in your businesses and you spending more time with us. I do want our ambassadors being far better connected to your businesses at work overseas and indeed in this country. The work that Martin Donnelly did for me on economic diplomacy, hugely important, reminding us that we aren't just there to understand the world, we have also got to feed back what's going on in our regions back to the world. To do that, you've got to be properly engaged in business. So all of that work gets us into the right direction, and there, of course, will be more to come. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
First of all, thank our Foreign Secretary David Lammy for such an interesting and indeed thoughtful speech. He touched on a number of areas, talking about the work being ongoing, being cumulative and being tough. But stability, partnership, reform and openness in trade were essential to this government's DNA, and some really interesting words there about partnership with our chambers across the globe and in the establishment of the Diplomatic Advisory Hub. We're going to now move on to the session, a series of 4 showcase sessions, where we're going to see showcases from a number of markets, strategic projects from 3 continents that highlight a small sample of the international trading opportunities that are available across the globe. We're going to touch on a number of sectors, from advanced manufacturing, fintech, logistics and supply chain, automotive innovation, aviation and advanced construction materials. We're going to kick off and move swiftly on and here head south to Hong Kong and the Greater Bay Area. So please join me in welcoming Daisy Head of Investment Promotion at Invest 8 Hong Kong's London office. Please join me in welcoming.